shall I be? That breath of the Spirit blowing in me.
Tack så mycket. På det temat Spirit of God så kommer Tim tala för oss om Mind of God. Välkommen upp till.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The mind of God. Sounds very intellectual, doesn't it? If you ask the average person this question, can you describe God, the mind of God, or in the inside, it's a pretty deep question. But are we able to answer that question? Are you able to? Of course, if I ask you offhand in the middle of the street, by the way, can you describe the inside of God's mind? Well, it's something you have to really contemplate, think deeply about. But we are lucky because we have the divine principle and we have Father's words. And they explain things so much more clearly than any other religion or philosophy. If you ask a Muslim to describe God, I mean, and I think there are many words for God, but you can think God is all-powerful. Yeah. If you think about Christianity, God is a loving Father, but also God is like is also all-powerful, and there is this feeling of a distance from God. So, what does the principle teach us, and why am I taking this topic? Because in order to know ourselves, we need to know God. In order to know God, we need to know ourselves. And yes, so let me begin. In the Divine Principle, the first chapter on the principles of creation and the nature of God, this passage is taken from the Bible, from Romans 1:20. Ever since the creation of the world, his invisible nature, namely his eternal power and deity, has been clearly perceived in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. So the idea is that in order to describe God, in order to know God, we can look at creation, because creation is a visible, a visible form of God, because everything is created by God. So if you can see the common characteristics within creation, you can learn something about God. And this is like the first chapter that we have probably heard many, many times. But still, we need to be reminded. So, how would we describe God? We talk about the external form and the internal character, because throughout creation we have, we go from like a man down to animals and plants and molecules and atoms and particles, and all those different levels, there is an external form. And for us, it's our physical body. And then the internal character is the mind, or with animals, the instinct. Or with plants, it's like its inherent directive nature, and then the characteristics of molecules and particles and atoms that make them behave in a certain way. So we know this, and because of this, then we can say, well, therefore the cause of all this must also have an internal character and an external form. There we would say that God has both a mind and a body, because we have a mind and a body. Even though we can't see God, we can't see God's body, God has an external form. And then also we see throughout creation masculinity and femininity, all the way from human beings down to particles and molecules, which we say are positive and negative. Therefore, from this we say God is both masculine and feminine. So this is the basic idea. To describe God, we look at creation, and these are the two fundamental characteristics, dual characteristics that we look at. And we're all familiar with this, aren't we? Yes. So maybe you've heard it so many times, you think, well, nothing new. So now I'd like to look at this aspect of God's external form and internal character in this way. So another way to put it is that the external form is the original energy, the energy of everything. And in the principle it talks about universal prime force. Yeah. So the external form of everything's made of energy, the energy of God. But then the internal form is is the heart, the intellect, emotion and will, or the mind of God. So we look at the mind of God, and this is also, whatever we look at God is we're looking at ourselves, because we are created by God. So, as I have mentioned before, the most important part of God's mind, internal character, is the heart. This is the fountain of love. This is the impulse to love and be united in love with the object of its love. This is the essential nature of heart, and it's our essential nature. Yes? We want to find objects to love. Even though the term sounds very technical, we want to share our lives with somebody. We want to have friends. We want to have a husband or wife or parents, children. So this is the heart. And this heart comes from God. This is the most, the profound internal aspect of God, the heart. And of course there's intellect, emotion and will. The thinking part, the feeling part and the desire to do. And this is within us, and this is within God. So God is God of action. But behind intellect, emotion and will is heart. And the same with us. The deepest part of us is the heart. And so from the heart comes love. And from the intellect is this desire to search for truth and to live by truth. And the emotional aspect of it is seeking beauty and the will to do goodness. So God is a God of love, a God of truth, a God of beauty, and God of goodness. So if we look at God's world, is that a beautiful world? Yes. It's still beautiful? If you look from space, you may see a few smoking, a lot of smoke, or you may see some patches of ground that have changed colour because they've been burnt. But basically, we are living in a world that God created, which is most beautiful. So it's a world of love. It's a world of truth. It's a world of beauty, and it's a world of goodness. Would you agree?
No.
Yes. So we can talk about God in words, and we can describe God, but when you look at that world, you can say, yes, God's mind is expressed in this beautiful world. And if you have anybody been in space, if you have been in space, that's the viewpoint you would get.
Spaced out, does that count?
And if you're spaced out, well, you wouldn't notice anything. So I'd like to show some pictures of the earth which demonstrate the love, the truth, the beauty and the goodness. Isn't that beautiful? How do you feel when you look at that? Your heart is moved. Yeah. It's the truth of life. This is truth. This is the real deal. Yes? And then the beauty of it, it resonates with our emotions. Yes? And the goodness. You want to go out there and be there, don't you? Yeah? So, look at this. Beautiful, beautiful bird, made with love. An expression of God's truth, beauty and goodness. Do you know what the bird's called? It's called a hummingbird. They flap very, very, very quickly, don't they? Amazing. I mean, I could just stare at that picture forever. It's so clear and crystal and beautiful. And the flower also. Yes. And the photographer was pretty smart. Yes. And then, if we look further, now we can see that animals, actually, what a lovely little family. Don't they love each other? Isn't the truth of their life is to live together? And aren't they beautiful to look at? And there's such goodness there. Yes. And I would add another word, I'd say humour. God is a God of humour. Would you agree?
Yes.
Has God ever showed you the humorous side of life? Or have you ever shown God the humorous side of life? And then what about this? So, of course, I don't know who's proposing to who, but there's certainly a feeling of love there. And this is the truth of their life. They are beautiful creatures. Such goodness. Oh, you just want to hold them, don't you? Yes. But then, Of all creation, who's the most beautiful? Who has the most goodness in them? Or should have the most goodness?
You do.
So let us look at this beautiful picture. So, babies, I don't know if babies have anything bad in them, but the love, the truth, the beauty and goodness shines in the purity of a baby's face. I mean, there's the humour, and maybe she's praying, I don't know what she's doing, and he seems a bit confused, and he's kind of excited about something. Something's going on in his life. So if we want to know the mind of God, you have to look at what God created. It's just so beautiful. It's so moving. Yes. I could look again. I could just stare at this. But of course, a family isn't the most complete form, you could say, of God's mind expressed in form, because there is the love between the three generations. There's the truth of living as a family, and the beauty of each face, and the goodness in their hearts. So we are magnificent beings, aren't we? So when you look in the mirror in the morning, even if you're a bit groggy, when you look at yourself, actually you're looking at God. You're looking at God's face, because every single face is an expression of God. And if we move on, then we have to ask the question, okay, so why did God create us? Why did God create you or me? Why? So how can we answer that question? First of all, God created us as his greatest masterpiece. Masterpiece. We are the greatest masterpiece. The world is a beautiful place, and all creation, but we are the most supreme beings. Do we realize that? Do we take our lives for granted? Do we feel, I'm not that good, I'm not that special, I'm okay, yeah. But actually, when God sees us, does God say, yeah, you're okay, you'll do, yeah. I've been trying to making all kinds of people, and you're okay, yeah. You're not quite perfect yet, but you're okay. But when God looks at us, does he see our imperfections? Yeah. So only God only sees our goodness, our beauty, our truth, and the love within us. So why don't we tell God how beautiful we are? Why don't we tell God, thank you, you created me, I'm a magnificent being. You created me, all the qualities that I have, I'm so grateful. That's why gratitude is very important, to recognize the goodness, to recognize your divinity. So, I have been reading the first chapter of Chong Song Gong, and it's all about God. And there's so much in there. But I keep reading and reading and reading until I kind of capture certain key points. So one of the first key points, this is what Father says: God wanted to create us as his greatest masterpiece. As our eternal true parent, God invested himself 100% in the creation of human beings. He endowed us with the right to equal status with him, to participate as his work as equals, to live with him, to inherit from him. God bestowed upon human beings all of his attributes. All of it. Are we lacking anything? We're not lacking anything. We have everything. It's being given to us. But do we feel we're lacking something? Do we feel something's missing inside of us? Do we feel incomplete? So, these words, the right of equal status. God is not there, but God and I are the same. Equal. Participate in his works as equal, so it means to be creative. Isn't it wonderful we can be creative? I think what gives me joy, and I think all of us joy in life, is when we can create. Creativity. It's wonderful. It's a gift from God. To live with him. So God is always with us. God is not far, far away. God is here with me, within me. And to inherit. So to inherit means everything is being given to me. Everything. This world is a world of plenty, not a world of lack and limitation. No? So all of his attributes. So why is it? Of course, we can say, yeah, because of the fall, we lost that connection. But actually, if we want God to be happy, if we want God to feel fulfilled in his creation of us, we have to, every single day of our lives, give gratitude to God, to thank him for everything he's given us, because it's overwhelming. So, here's a face. Actually, it's a computerized face, so it's not made by God, but anyway, we're co-creators. So there's a face. So what does it say? What does Father say about the face that God created? He talks about the eyelashes. The eyelashes, didn't just spontaneously occur by some mutation. The eyelashes are there because of dust. Yeah, because there's dust in the air, and it stops the dust getting into our eyes. Isn't that amazing? God created our eyes with eyelashes. Amazing. Imagine if we didn't have eyelashes. Yeah? What a problem. Yes? We have eyebrows. Wonderful eyebrows. They're just in the right place. So when you sweat, they can accumulate there. They don't just run down into your eyes. You wouldn't like that, would you? Now, of course, if you are very sweaty, they will run into your eyes, but they're pretty clever. And then we have eyelids. Again, eyelids. Yeah? You can close your eyes and open them. We're blinking all the time, aren't we? We're kind of cleaning our eyes. Again, if dust gets in there, you'll feel it. But you can. Then you'll start to cry. Have you noticed that? If you have a little speck of dust and you can't get it out, something's in there, or even a piece of your eyelash. But if you cry, it kind of runs out, or it's easier. Clever, yeah. And of course, our eyes. Our eyes.
Ears.
Oh, ears. Sorry. Did you know that there's like two chambers? There's the outer chamber and the inner chamber. And what Father says in the speech, he says that if we didn't have this outer chamber, then the sound would deafen us. It's just too great. So we have two layers to kind of soften the sound. Yeah. So our ears didn't just spontaneously come out of our head. They were designed by God. Our nose. So, yes, our nose. Imagine if your nose was upside down. The way it's shaped is perfect. So if you do cry, then the tears can go this way. Or if you sweat, So it's a pretty good bridge to have there. But imagine if it just spontaneously grew upside down. But no, God designed it because we are magnificent. Our lips. Lips. If we didn't have lips and our mouth was open the whole time, that would be a problem, wouldn't it? Yes. Also for talking, it's pretty clever that we can use our lips or sing. Yeah. And they're very soft, aren't they? And you can shape them. Very clever. And our teeth. We need our teeth to chew. Our teeth also are part of our speech. If we didn't have teeth, it would make a big difference to be able to speak clearly. But the teeth are very clever. You have these sharp ones here for cutting it up, and you have these corner ones, and then the back ones for munching. All of our teeth are designed so that we can eat food. Of course, we have baby teeth. Then they disappear. They drop out because we're growing, and then God very cleverly gave us some new teeth. We have these wisdom teeth at the back. That's when we become wise. Yes. So, and then of course, our tongue. Imagine if we didn't have a tongue. We couldn't speak at all. And the tongue and the teeth have to work well together, otherwise we'll be cutting our tongue up. Have any of you cut your tongue when you've been eating?
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens sometimes, but if you just look just at our face and the different parts of our face, We're a masterpiece. Everything just works together. We don't need to think about it. So God created us first as his greatest masterpiece. Secondly, he created us for the sake of joy and love. We are God's object partners of love. So it does say in the principle that the purpose of life is joy. That's the purpose of life. But to have joy, you need to share love. And God's heart of love, God cannot experience joy, cannot experience love unless he has a partner of love. And everything he created is for that purpose. So he says this: God is the origin of heart and emotion, and his purpose is to create joy. But one cannot feel joy alone. The greatest joy comes from the exchange of love between subject and object partners. God created all things to have object partners he could love. Love can only come from another person. So maybe I'm just repeating stuff you've heard so many times, but I think it's really important that we remind ourselves. That's why we should keep studying and studying and studying. So that's why God created. That's why God, if we are not complete, if we are not responding to God, how can God feel fulfilled? So now I would like to look at some example in the real world to do with partners of love. Maybe an unusual example, but this is to do with Sweden. You know Sweden? Sweden, loneliness is a big issue in Sweden that affects both young and old. This was a BBC documentary recently. Did anybody see this? Okay, so this block of flats in Helsingborg is trying to solve the problem of loneliness. You can only live in this block of flats if you are under 25. Anybody here under 25? No? Okay. Oh, you're a pensioner. Do you have any pensioners here? Yes, okay. So you're welcome to live there if you wish. But you have to socialize. You need an object partner to love. You need an object partner to love you. You need to share. You can't just live in your own room or your own apartment and ignore people or stay away from people. You have to socialize. So that's in the contract. To live in this flat, you have to promise to socialize. Yes, and how are they going to do that? Well, it's all part of a plan to help tackle loneliness in Sweden, a country where over half of all homes only have one occupant. What a disgrace. How terrible. Isn't that a disgrace? Is that something to be proud of? No. So, they have to spend 2 hours a week together. God, is that too much? Can you cope? 2 hours together with somebody in this flat? Well, actually, with the people in this flat, yes. So I'd like to give two examples of a young person and an old person who get on very well together. So here we have Fia Stegroff, who's age 20, and she says, I worked my 8 hours, went home, ate, and went to game. The computer games. And she said she felt depressed. She felt lonely. Every day doing the same thing. And Gunnel Eriksson, age 86, I had a very comfortable life, but it was so lonely. And she said she kind of felt she was becoming a bit odd, a bit strange, just being alone the whole time. But they moved into this block of flats. And this is what the young girl says. And she's teached me, it's bad grammar actually, this was from the text. She teached me a lot about her life. Should be taught. Sorry, it's taught. She teaches me. Yeah, and she said it's really fun to be with her. And then what Gunnel said, Fia's helped me very much with my computer and the TV. I mean, myself being an older person, I appreciate Philip, my son, helping out with the computer sometime. Do any of you older people appreciate younger minds kind of dealing with technical things? Yes. And of course, if you're younger, then you can learn get to know the life story of an older person and come to appreciate it and learn something of their wisdom and life experience. So we need both, don't we? What a great idea. So this is an example of why God created us, that we should be partners of love. And so the third reason God created us, God could assume a physical form through Adam and Eve. God could assume a physical form through Adam and Eve. And this is what Father says. God created human beings in order to assume a physical form and dwell in our bodies. Adam and Eve were made to be God's body. So we are made as God's body. I am God's body, and God created me so he could himself become visible through me. So God dwells in us. Do you feel that to your bones? Do you feel God dwells in you? If I ask that question. So that's why God created us. He wants to assume a physical form and dwell in us. The creation of human beings are God's manifestation in substance. We are God's manifestation, manifested in substance. We're the real. That's why God created us. Yeah? This world was created so that the incorporeal, like the invisible God, could emerge as a substantial God. So we are God. Is that right? Am I God? Are you God? Are you God? Are you God? Oh, of course, yes. So, there are a few other people who've made some statements about this which I think are similar. This is Wayne Dyer. Heard of him? He's kind of one of these spiritual writers. He died about a year ago. He's kind of a well-known. He's written many books about growth, spiritual growth and development. And he says people need to know that they are God. We mostly do not recognize that. We've lost a sense of our own divinity. Do you believe that? Yeah. And then another famous person, this is M. Scott Peck. Did he write The Road Less Traveled? Yeah. So he says this: God wants us to become himself, or herself, or itself. We are growing toward godhood. God is the goal of evolution. It's the same thing, isn't it? Same thing. Would you agree? Yeah. And then what about Albert Einstein? He says, history is littered with examples of men who would become gods, but only one example of God becoming man. Only one example. So who's that? Jesus. But then the thing is that Christians have made Jesus into God, like no longer human, like God, separate from us. But actually, what Einstein is saying, and I understand from the principal viewpoint, is that God wants to become us. God wants to express through us. So Jesus is the only person up to now in history who fully received the love of God, where God could express himself fully. And that's why we say that Jesus was the only begotten Son of God, because God fully expressed. So God could become himself through Jesus. But now we live in a new age, and we have true parents. And so we refer to Father being the only begotten Son of God, and Mother being the only begotten daughter of God. Yes? Which means that they fully realized God's presence and God's love as God wanted, and God wants with us. Of course, if you look at the external face of Father and Mother, they're Koreans, and they are, like you could say, they're just externally, they're the same as anybody else. And therefore, when we look at a person, do we see the face of God? Do we see the God within the person? Because it's easy. Father's being criticized, Mother's being criticized, and even today Mother's criticized within our movement, because people don't see God within her. Yeah? And it's our distortion of reality, of not actually appreciating and valuing and showing love and respect to every human being. You are walking, talking God. You are. Can I see it? When I look at your face, can I see with the eyes of love? Can the God within me, can I feel God's love within me, see it within you? There's a story from the Second World War. I'm trying to remember the name. There's a lady who wrote a book, and she was put in a prisoner of war camp, a Christian. And in that prisoner of war camp, her sister died. She survived. But later, what's her name? I almost got the name then. When she came out, she wrote books, and she went and gave talks about her life in prison and what she learned as a Christian and how she learned to overcome and to love her enemies. And one day in the audience, at the end of the talk, the man who came up to her had been the head of that prisoner of war camp. So he met. When she met him, she felt, I can't forgive him. I can't forgive this man for what he did. And so she asked God, help me to love him. I can't love him. And then she felt this presence of love and overwhelm her. She could feel forgiveness for him because it is God's love. And this is a famous writer and a famous book, and I just can't remember at the moment. Yes. Thank you, Corrie ten Boom, who wrote this book called Corrie ten Boom. Yeah, you should read the book. So that was, for me, that was the most moving part of the whole story. But it's like she couldn't forgive this person, but God could. And when she gave herself to God, surrendered to God, then God could come through her and she could feel that love and forgiveness.
The Hiding Place.
Good, thank you. Yeah, thank you for filling in the details. The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. So, God is becoming us. God becoming us. God becoming me. I think I'm getting some realizations by studying, and I've mentioned before about one person who inspires me is Michael Bernard Beckwith, and he expresses how God is a presence of love that is seeking to express itself through us. That God is within us, but we have to let God come out of us. But we block God with our concepts and our limitations and our negative emotions and all these blocks that stop us. And so I suppose a spiritual life is unblocking all this. So we allow God's Spirit to come through us. God is within us already. When we were created, His Spirit was planted within us. It's there. But we're dumb. We're unaware because we can't feel God. But it's because the vibration of our energy is something God cannot come into. Yeah? So we have to raise our vibration. That's why learning to love, to have gratitude, to be joyful, to give, to live for others. This spiritual way of life allows God's Spirit to come through us rather than we block God because I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I would like to look at a quotation from this man who had a near-death experience. His name is called Mellon Thomas Benedict. Unusual name. He had this experience in the 1990s, but he died 3 years ago. And this is what he says, which I find also fits in with everything I've said. He says, people are so busy trying to become God that they ought to realize that we are already God and God is becoming us. That's what it is really about. God is becoming us. We shouldn't be trying to reach God up there. God, you're up there, let me climb up and find you. But it's more that God is wanting to become us. God is there and wants to come out of us. I find that very profound. So I talked before also about these 4 stages of consciousness because it's awareness. Are we aware of all this?
Yes.
We are aware. Good. So if you remember before, I talked about this victim level. This is the fallen mind, victim. I'm controlled by external forces. Then manifester. I am a creator of my own life. God gave me the capacity to create because I'm a creator like God. But this channel God creates through me, this is where we need to surrender. This is a surrender level. I can't do it all by myself. Surrender. Be a channel. Allow God to work through me until we reach this level of oneness, which is our natural state. This is a natural state. So maybe rather than talking about the 4 stages of consciousness, I should talk about God becoming us. God is becoming us through these different stages. If we can open up ourselves, open up our minds and hearts, and allow God to reveal himself and herself through us. And finally, so I've changed the title. I called it Inside the Mind of God. I've changed it to God Becoming Us, because within the mind of God, God's desire is to manifest within us, within our bodies, within this world. And when that can happen, then God can feel joy. Because Father talks about how God is a suffering God, and that's a very hard thing to contemplate. I don't like thinking about that. But then I can understand intellectually, if you were God and you created all these beings, or actually you could say if you're a parent and you love your children and you know what's best for them, but they feel I'm not good enough, or I don't believe in myself, and so on, or they rebel against you, I don't want to listen to you, I know better than you. It's very frustrating. So I'm a parent, God is a parent. We love our children. So we want to raise them up. We want them to become aware of God's presence. We want them to become God, So I can compare myself as a parent with God as a parent. It's the same feeling. Have I suffered? Yes. Have you? If you're a parent, you have suffered. Being a parent, it's part of life. It's part of the process. But suffering is not bad. Suffering is a way to deepen our hearts. And I would say my life, experience of suffering, have caused me to search and go deeper within myself. And I would say that I'm a better person. I understand things better than I did because of suffering. But not just suffering. But suffering, I think we can see more like it's like a message from God. What is it I need to change? Or what is it I need to develop? What is it needs to come out of me, needs to awaken? Because there's some blockage. And I think that's what life is about. We want to grow, and then things get in our way within ourselves or around us. And then how do we deal with it? But if we turn to God and we say, God, what do I need to do to overcome this? A few weeks ago, I mentioned Ho'oponopono, this method of kind of liberating yourself and the influence of ancestors. And these words of I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. Because those words are a way to liberate us, change the energy, and open up ourselves to God, and also to help our ancestors to be freed. So it's not just about us, it's not just about our family, it's about our ancestors. But I think that the knowledge we get from the principle, from Father's words, is incredible. But we need to study it, and we need to understand it, and we need to keep studying and studying and studying and practice and practice and practice so that we grow and grow and grow. And with that, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Important point that everything we need we already have inside. I read something like that a few weeks ago, and it's so easy to look outside all the time for answers when actually we have so much inside. Thank you so much.
It's God.
It's God. Yes.